My name is Eleanor Ridgway. I was once the kind of woman who turned heads at galas, chaired charitable foundations, and built a family estate that stood like a monument to legacy and love. My name was on buildings, in society columns, whispered with respect or envy, depending on who was doing the talking, but on my 83rd birthday, I sat alone. Not even a phone call. 10 years. That's how long it had been since any of my 3 children had remembered the day I brought them into this world. No cake, no flowers, no visit. Just silence so loud it felt like thunder in my bones. The staff at Ridgway Hospice are kind. They brought me tea, smiled with that same sympathetic softness they offer to those they believe are fading. A nurse named Angela hummed as she fluffed my pillows. She doesn't know my story. She just thinks I'm another rich widow whose children are busy. Busy. That word cuts deeper than most insults. There was a time when Vanessa, my eldest, would make such a fuss over birthdays that the planning began 6 months in advance. "Mama deserves fireworks," she once said, back when she was just a law student full of fire and promises. Now she's a partner at a prestigious firm, all pearls and press releases, too important for phone calls unless there's a press angle. Max was always the wild one. I remember his sticky hands tugging at my skirts, demanding bedtime stories and second helpings of cake. He dreamed big, crashed harder, and called home less and less, until all that remained were rumors of failing startups and a mountain of debt. Lately, I hear from him only when he needs to talk business. And Bella, my baby, she lives on a screen now, an influencer, whatever that really means. Her life is filtered, captioned, curated for strangers, while I, her mother, haven't seen her in years. I once commented on one of her posts. She blocked me. But today, on my 83rd birthday, someone did come. She wasn't wearing designer. Just a simple lavender sweater and a nervous smile. She had short hair, clear eyes, and carried a small box wrapped in plain paper. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Ridgway," she said gently, holding it out with both hands. "It's not much, but I made it myself." Inside was a small vanilla cake, lopsided, imperfect, and beautiful in its honesty. For a long moment, I said nothing, just looked at her, then at the cake, and felt something stir in my chest, a kind of warmth I hadn't felt in a decade. "Iris, isn't it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded. "I thought maybe you shouldn't have to be alone today." What she didn't know, what they didn't know, is that I've been watching, waiting, planning. There are stories the world has never heard about the Ridgway family, stories I've hidden behind pearls and curtains, behind polished silver and dusty portraits. But secrets have weight, and mine are getting heavy. I smiled at Iris as she lit a single candle on the cake. "Make a wish," she said. I did, and if wishes had names, mine would have been justice. It's strange what happens when people hear you might be dying. Suddenly, the phones ring. Suddenly, flights are booked. Suddenly, children who haven't remembered your birthday in a decade show up with flowers and worried faces. Faces that, to the untrained eye, might pass for genuine concern. But I wasn't always old, and I've never been naive. They came one by one, pretending not to notice each other's surprise, feigning warmth for a mother they had long buried in convenience. Vanessa arrived first. Of course she did. She always was the strategist. I heard her heels before I saw her. That sharp, fast click-clack that once echoed through courtrooms now echoed through the quiet hallways of Ridgway Hospice like a performance. She swept into my room wearing a fitted navy coat, pearl earrings, and that crisp scent of wealth and ambition. "Oh, Mama," she said, voice trembling just enough to be believable. "You look so frail." I raised an eyebrow. "Don't act so shocked, darling. Time has a way of catching up to all of us," she faltered, but only for a moment. "I should have come sooner." I didn't respond. Instead, I watched her gaze flit around the room, not to the window or the bedside books, but to the lockbox near the armoire, the file folders stacked on the writing desk. the leather-bound journal I keep by the lamp. She wasn't here to weep. She was here to see. Not long after, Max appeared, slouching into the doorway like a man who just talked his way out of a lawsuit. His hug was half-hearted, his smile too eager, and his eyes kept darting toward Vanessa's like he needed an ally or an alibi. "Hey, Ma," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "You, holding up okay?" I stared at him for a long moment. "I'm not dead yet, Max," he laughed. "Good, because I brought you something." He reached into his coat and pulled out a bottle of whiskey, expensive, aged, unopened. "For your collection," he said, placing it on the table like an offering. "You remember I stopped drinking after your father died," I said flatly. "Oh, right." And then came Bella. She entered with a phone in one hand and a silk scarf around her neck, which she removed the moment she saw the lighting wasn't ideal for her skin tone. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, or from whatever filter she'd applied to her face before she walked in. She kissed my cheek, took a few selfies, and asked if she could tag the hospice in her story. "Your hair looks great, Mama." "Very elegant," she said as she adjusted the brightness on her phone. I said nothing. I simply looked at them. My children, standing around my bed like a jury trying to read the judge. That night, I heard them whispering in the hallway outside my door. "Do you think she updated the will?" "She must have. It's been years. If we're all here, we should ask." "No, don't push her, not yet. Let her think we care. Let her think." "Let me think." They had no idea. They thought I was frail, they thought I was slipping, they thought the game was almost over. But what they didn't realize was, I was just getting started. I didn't sleep the night they arrived. Their voices had faded into silence, their performance of grief shelved until morning. But I could feel their energy pulsing through the hospice walls, like vultures circling a carcass, not out of love, but out of entitlement. I knew the moment had come, and I was ready for it. By morning, the hospice staff had laid out tea and delicate biscuits in the sunroom, an act of compassion that, to my children, must have looked like a pre-funeral brunch. Vanessa was already seated, back straight, legs crossed, speaking low into her phone. Max stood by the window, scrolling through messages with the air of a man waiting on a stock to crash. Bella wore sunglasses indoors. "You wanted to see us?" Vanessa asked as I entered, pushing my walker with deliberate poise. "Yes," I said, my voice calm but clear. "It's time we had a conversation about the estate." That got their attention. Phones were lowered, backs straightened. Even Bella removed her glasses, eyes wide and alert, like a child about to open a gift. "I've contacted Gregory Lorne," I continued, naming the family's longtime attorney. "He'll be arriving shortly. I thought it best we settle any uncertainties." Max chuckled. "Well, it's not like we're rushing you into the ground, Ma." Vanessa shot him a warning glance. "We just want to make sure your wishes are respected, Mother." "Funny," I said, folding my hands. "I don't recall you asking about my wishes at any point in the last 10 years. Gregory arrived 10 minutes later, briefcase in hand, grave as a man entering a courtroom. He greeted everyone with the formality of someone walking a tightrope, because he knew what was coming. "As requested by Mrs. Ridgway," Gregory began, "I am here to disclose the updated terms of her estate. This was her decision. I advised against reading it now, but she insisted." The room stilled. Vanessa folded her arms. Max leaned forward. Bella, who had just opened Instagram, slowly lowered her phone. "The entirety of the Ridgway estate," Gregory read, "including all properties, bank accounts, investments, and personal effects, is to be transferred upon death or incapacitation to Ms. Iris Moore." There was a beat of pure, paralyzing silence. "Who the hell is Iris Moore?" Vanessa snapped, her voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. Max stood up. "That's gotta be a mistake." Bella blinked. "Iris? The girl who brings her tea?" Gregory cleared his throat. "It is not a mistake. Mrs. Ridgway revised the will 8 months ago, signed and witnessed." "She's a stranger," Vanessa hissed. "She's manipulating you." "Is she?" I said, voice cool. "Or did I finally decide to leave something to someone who actually showed up?" "She's a hospice volunteer," Max shouted. "This is fraud." "Careful," I said, meeting his eyes. "You're speaking like a man with something to lose," Bella scoffed. "You're giving everything to some girl with a cake and a fake smile?" I turned to her slowly. "I gave you the world, you gave me silence." The room cracked apart then, not physically but emotionally. Years of resentment, entitlement, and unresolved guilt spilled out like gas into a flame. And I stood in the center of it, steady, unmoved. They thought they'd come to say goodbye to a dying woman. They didn't realize they were standing in the middle of a reckoning. After Gregory left, the hospice room was electric with unease. My children paced the corridors like restless animals, whispering furiously, casting glances my way as if I'd grown horns. But I knew what they were really looking for, her, and they found her. Iris had returned the next morning, as she always did. No fanfare, no expectations, just a calm smile, a soft cardigan, and a book tucked under her arm. She came to sit with me and read, as if the day before hadn't just shattered the world they thought they owned. But this time, Vanessa intercepted her. "You're Iris?" she said, blocking the hallway with the cold steel of her presence. "We need to talk." Iris blinked, confused but polite. "Of course." They moved to the sunroom, where Max and Bella had already gathered, forming a makeshift inquisition. I watched from my chair just beyond the archway, close enough to hear, far enough to be ignored. "Let's skip the performance," Vanessa began, her voice tight with rage. "Who are you, really?" "I'm a volunteer," Iris said simply. "I've been visiting Mrs. Ridgway for about a year now." "A year?" Max scoffed. "And in that time you convinced her to hand over everything? That's either a world record in manipulation or something else entirely." Bella leaned forward. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "We're Ridgways." Iris smiled gently. "I know exactly who you are. That's why I kept coming." There was a silence then, brief, uncertain. "You know what this looks like," Vanessa hissed. "Yes," Iris said softly. "It looks like 3 grown children scrambling for pieces of a pie they didn't bother baking." That quiet fire in her, it made me proud. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't boastful. But she wasn't going to be bullied either. "We've never seen you before," Max said, trying a new angle. "So why are there pictures of you in our house?" I saw Iris stiffen ever so slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked. Vanessa pulled out her phone. "We were looking through old family albums in Mother's study last night. In one of the photos from the garden party, 1989, there's a girl, around 8 or 9, standing in the background behind the hedges. We thought nothing of it until we realized she looks just like you." Max added, "Same jawline, same eyes. It's like you were always there." Iris hesitated. "That's not possible. I've never been here before last year." "But your face is in our past," Vanessa pressed. "So tell us, Iris, who are you really?" I watched Iris's fingers tighten around the edge of her book. Her breathing slowed, but her voice never wavered. "I'm someone who showed up when it mattered," she said. That's all that should matter to her, and she turned and walked away. But in that moment, I saw it in her eyes. Something unspoken. A shadow. A memory. A truth she didn't yet have the courage to say out loud. My children were right about one thing. Iris wasn't just some volunteer. She was a thread tied to something long buried in this family. A thread that, once pulled, would unravel everything. And for the first time in decades, I wanted it unraveled. It rained that night. Not a soft spring drizzle, but a cold, steady downpour that hammered against the hospice windows like a warning. The kind of storm that brings things up from the earth. Roots, bones, secrets. That's when I told Iris it was time. She helped me into my coat, draped a shawl over my shoulders, and said nothing as we stepped out into the night. The staff were long used to her comings and goings, and no one dared question me when I said I wanted fresh air. Iris wheeled me down the gravel path, past the gates, toward the edge of the Ridgway estate, the part of the grounds no one visited anymore. The old greenhouse stood in the shadows like a ghost of the past. Its glass panes were fogged with time, its iron frame tangled with ivy and memory. I hadn't stepped inside in nearly 30 years, but I knew exactly where everything was. You never forget where you bury your sins. Iris, I said as we entered the glass house, you've asked who you are. I think it's time I gave you a piece of the answer. She didn't speak, just followed as I pointed to the floorboards beneath the broken potting table. Together, we pulled them up, old wood splintering with age, the earth beneath damp and fragrant with rot. There, wrapped in oilcloth and twine, lay the locked metal box I'd hidden all those years ago, the past in its most literal form. My hands trembled as I brushed off the dirt, not from weakness, but from weight, the weight of what I had done, of what I had hidden. I handed the box to Iris. You kept this? She whispered. I buried it, I corrected, because some things couldn't be spoken. But silence only grows louder the longer you hold it. We returned to my room before dawn, soaked through but more awake than we'd been in years. When we opened the box together, even Iris held her breath. Inside were yellowed photographs, brittle with time, my sister Lillian smiling at the summer lake house, my late husband Charles standing a little too close to her, and then one picture in particular. Lillian in the greenhouse, visibly pregnant, face defiant. There were letters too. Her letters. Unsent. Unopened. She wrote me after I cast her out, pleaded with me, told me she was keeping the child, told me she didn't want revenge, only peace. I never replied. At the very bottom of the box was the final piece. A sealed manila envelope marked with one word in my handwriting. Daughter. Iris stared at it, unmoving. She didn't open it. Not yet. She wasn't ready. And I wasn't done telling her the story. We sat there in silence for a long time, the storm still whispering outside. She placed her hand over mine, not out of obligation or pity, but something deeper. I came here to help you die with dignity, she said. But it feels like you're helping me be born. I turned toward the window, eyes on the horizon, knowing what was coming next. This family believed it could silence the truth forever. But the truth was now standing in the garden, alive, breathing, and ready to be heard. Vanessa always did have a nose for damage control. The moment Iris's name appeared in the will, she retreated into her world of contacts, research databases, and private investigators. To her, every crisis could be solved with information, leverage, but this time the truth she uncovered didn't give her power. It shook her to her core. She came storming into my room without knocking, her iPad clutched tightly under one arm, and her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. You lied to us, she said coldly. I looked up from my knitting, unbothered. You'll need to be more specific. She tossed the tablet onto the bed. A scanned document glowed on the screen. A sealed adoption record, recently unsealed through legal loopholes only someone like Vanessa could find. Why didn't you ever tell us about Lillian? She demanded. You always said you were an only child. And you always said you'd never lie to your clients, I said calmly. Yet, here we are, she faltered, her lawyer's armor cracking just a little. Lillian was your sister, she pressed. And this record, it links her to a child placed in a closed adoption in 1989. The child's name was redacted, but it was the same year that picture was taken. The same month she disappeared, and the child was a girl. I'm aware, I said softly. I was the one who signed the paperwork. Her face went pale. You knew? I arranged it. Vanessa looked like she'd been punched in the stomach. You took your sister's child and erased her. You lied to all of us for our entire lives. She was 17, pregnant, abandoned by the man she thought loved her. That man was your father. She staggered back. No. Yes. I felt the tremble in my hands, not from age, but from memory. Lillian refused to abort. She refused to run. She said she wanted to raise the child. I begged her to go away quietly. She wouldn't. So I made a choice. I had her sent away, and when the baby was born, I arranged for a private adoption. I paid the agency. I used a lawyer who owed me favors, and I told the world she had died in an accident. Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. And that baby is Iris? I nodded. She doesn't know yet, but she will, when she's ready. Outside the door, I heard a soft step. Someone lingering, listening. I wondered if it was Max, or Bella, or Iris herself. The walls of Ridgeway Hospice were paper thin. Secrets had nowhere left to hide. You made us believe there was no one else, Vanessa said, her voice breaking for the first time. You made us believe we were the only ones who mattered. You were never the only ones, I said. You were just the ones who stayed close enough to be seen, and far enough away to forget who I truly was. Vanessa picked up her iPad, her composure slipping back into place like a mask. This isn't over, she said. No, I replied. It's only just beginning. That night, I found Iris alone in the garden, staring up at the stars like she was searching for someone she couldn't name. And I wondered how long it would take before she saw her reflection not in me, but in the shadow of the sister I betrayed. Because ghosts don't stay buried forever, especially not family. Quiet places, almost too quiet. Every cough echoes, every creak of the floorboards is magnified by the weight of what isn't said. It's a silence that presses against your chest, like it's waiting for the sound of a final breath. But the silence that fell after Vanessa discovered the truth wasn't peaceful. It was watchful, tense, and heavy with something I hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not for me, for Iris. She had started to pull away from the others, avoiding eye contact, politely declining Vanessa's offers to talk, and refusing Max's sudden interest in getting to know her better. Even Bella, who never cared for anyone outside a camera frame, had begun following Iris through the halls, pretending to document hospice life for a healing social media series. But this wasn't curiosity, it was circling, and Iris could feel it too. I think they want to scare me, she told me one morning as she arranged flowers beside my bed. Her voice was calm, but her fingers trembled. Maybe even worse. What makes you say that? I asked, though I already knew. She hesitated, then leaned in. Yesterday I found my pills switched out. The label was right, but the capsules were different, larger, faded. I didn't take them. I felt my stomach tighten. Did you tell anyone? No, she said. But I asked Angela to run them to the pharmacy just in case. She called me this morning. The pills aren't even in production anymore. They expired 5 years ago. Someone had gone into her belongings. Someone had tampered with her medication. And that someone wasn't just trying to scare her. They were trying to erase her. That evening, Iris took the back stairs to avoid Bella, who had started filming her every move under the guise of wellness content. She never made it to my room. She was found at the bottom of the main staircase, unconscious, her head bleeding, her arm twisted unnaturally beneath her. The hospice called an ambulance immediately. I arrived moments later, wheeled into the hallway in a panic. I saw Vanessa crouching beside Iris, phone in hand, calling someone with a clipped tone and no visible concern. Max stood off to the side, biting his nails and looking around as though waiting for someone to accuse him. Bella was already live streaming, tears painted on, voice shaky, saying things like, "Please keep her in your thoughts, we don't know what happened." But I did. I knew, because I had once orchestrated a betrayal that changed the course of an innocent girl's life. And now, history was trying to repeat itself. That night, I called Gregory. "I want you to come here," I said. "Bring the document I gave you 25 years ago." He was silent for a beat. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I replied. "It's time to unseal the confession. If they're going to play with poison, let them see the roots." I sat by the window as the ambulance lights faded into the dark, my heart heavier than it had been in years. This was no longer about inheritance, it was about survival. Gregory arrived the next morning just after dawn, his coat damp with mist, his expression unreadable. He was carrying a leather case, scuffed at the corners and worn by time. It was the same one he'd used when he first helped Charles and me set up our estate, back when Ridgway was a name that meant legacy, not scandal. He asked to speak with me alone. I nodded. We sat in the hospice's private lounge, a small, sun-drenched room with dusty floral curtains and a ticking wall clock that seemed louder than it should have been. "Are you sure you want to do this, Eleanor?" he asked, unlocking the case. "I waited too long not to," I said. He pulled out the envelope, thick, sealed in red wax, bearing my full name in bold script. It had remained untouched for nearly 3 decades. "I swore I would only open this upon your death or your direct instruction," he said. "Well," I replied, "I think we've established that reports of my death have been premature." He gave a small smile and broke the seal. Inside were 7 typed pages. My confession, written the night Lillian disappeared. As Gregory read it aloud, the words felt like ghosts being summoned. "My name is Eleanor Ridgway. I am writing this confession on the evening of June 11th, 1989. I have betrayed my sister, Lillian. She was 17, pregnant, and alone. I told her I would help her. Instead, I sent her away. I paid a private agency to place her unborn child into a sealed adoption. I told our family she had run off with a man who didn't love her. When she begged to come home, I refused her calls. That child, my niece, was born on October 4th. I never told my husband that I knew the child was his. I never told Lillian that I forgave her. I never told myself that I was capable of such cruelty until it was too late." Gregory looked up at me then, his voice catching. "Eleanor, are you ready for the consequences?" "I've lived with them for 35 years, I said. "The only difference now is I'm no longer hiding them." Later that day, I had Iris brought to my room. She was pale, her head bandaged, her eyes clouded with confusion and pain. But she was alive, and strong, and ready. I handed her the letter. She took it silently, unfolding the paper with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the words, line by line, until she reached the end. When she looked up, she didn't speak right away. Then finally, quietly, "You're saying I'm not just someone you met in a hospice?" "No," I said, tears slipping down my cheek. "You are my sister's daughter, my niece. And for what it's worth, I have loved you as more than family. I've loved you as a chance to make things right." She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She simply sat beside me and held my hand. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Confessions aren't meant to erase pain. They're meant to give it shape. So that maybe, just maybe, it can be carried together. I remember the morning the nurses thought I had passed. My breathing had slowed. I drifted in and out of consciousness, somewhere between memory and peace. The doctors whispered about shallow vitals and DNR orders. A nurse tried to rouse me, then quietly called for the family. By noon, my children had been summoned to Ridgway Hospice with solemn urgency. And just like that, the show began. Vanessa arrived in black, pressed and flawless, her grief calculated to the syllable. Max stumbled in behind her, wearing the same suit he'd worn to their father's funeral, still rumpled, still too big, still unbuttoned at the collar. Bella came last, holding a latte and an iPhone on a tripod, softly narrating her heartbreak to her followers in real time. She was complicated, she said, wiping away a tear that hadn't fallen. But she was my mother, and love is never perfect. I could have laughed, if I hadn't been too busy pretending to be unconscious. Gregory arrived shortly after with a sealed copy of my will in hand, wearing the face of a man who'd kept too many secrets for too long. They gathered in the sunroom for what they assumed would be a formality. Vanessa stood at the head of the table. "We need to contest," she said. "This isn't about money. It's about protecting our family's reputation," Max scoffed. "It's about money, Ness. Don't dress it up." Bella just pouted at her phone screen. "Should I go live at the funeral? Or would that be too much?" "You don't even know the first thing about too much," Vanessa muttered, pouring herself a glass of hospice lemonade. That's when the video arrived, not to them, to Gregory. He stood and turned on the TV mounted in the corner of the room. The screen crackled to life. Then there I was, not frail, not comatose, very much alive. I was seated in the garden, dressed in one of my old ridgeline shawls, sunlight on my face, voice steady as iron. Vanessa, Max, Bella. If you're watching this, then you believe I'm gone. And that's interesting, because you've already begun to divide my legacy like vultures before the feast. Max paled. Bella dropped her phone. I continued, my image glowing from the screen like a ghost returned. For 10 years, you forgot me. For 10 years, I waited for a call, a letter, even a voicemail you forgot to hang up. I wasn't always a perfect mother, but I was present. I gave, I built. I protected you from the truth, and you used my silence as permission to disappear. The camera zoomed in slightly. Iris Moore is not a stranger. She is my sister's child. She is Ridgway blood. She showed up, not for inheritance, but for me. She gave me her time, her care, her grace. Vanessa tried to turn off the screen. Gregory blocked her. I faked my exit, I said calmly, because I wanted to see what you would do when the mask of performance fell away. I wanted to know if you were capable of remorse, of change. There was a pause. And now I know. The screen went black. In the stunned silence that followed, Bella finally whispered, "She's alive?" Gregory nodded. "Very much so." And just like that, the false funeral became something else entirely. A reckoning. They didn't know what to expect when I returned. 3 days after the fake farewell, I walked through the hospice's front doors. Not in a wheelchair, not flanked by doctors, but standing tall in a tailored navy coat. The same one I wore the day I handed over the keys to Ridgway House 30 years ago. The staff gasped. A nurse clutched her chest. Someone whispered, "She's supposed to be dead?" But I wasn't dead. I was finally done being silent. My children were waiting in the sunroom when I arrived. They rose to their feet like guilty schoolchildren caught cheating mid-exam. Vanessa was the first to speak. "Mother, what is this? Some kind of test?" "No," I said. "It was the truth. And you failed it." Max looked away. Bella said nothing, just blinked, stunned, for once without a camera to hide behind. I laid 3 sealed envelopes on the table in front of them, thick paper, names written in my hand. A 4th envelope, marked Iris, rested in my coat pocket. "This is my final gift to each of you," I said. "Inside is a key, a clue, or a consequence. That depends on what you do next." Vanessa narrowed her eyes. "Is this legal?" I turned to her slowly. "You're a lawyer. You tell me." No one reached for an envelope. Not at first. "I'm stepping away from the estate," I continued. "It will be managed entirely by Iris. She is the future of this family, whether you accept it or not. You can fight it, or you can learn from her. Your choice." Max's voice was low. "So we're just cut out?" "No," I said, walking slowly toward the window, where the garden bloomed in full summer glory. "You're being given a choice. And for the first time in your lives, it's not about money, it's about legacy. Redemption, meaning." Bella finally reached for hers. Her hands shook. She opened it and pulled out a small, ornate key. Along with it, a note in my handwriting. To the attic of Ridgway House. Inside, journals. Yours, mine, Lillian's. Find your voice, not your followers. She sat back down without a word, eyes wet but unreadable. Vanessa opened hers next. Inside was a legal folder. Inside, evidence of every case you ever buried, every favor you cashed in with Ridgway money. Use it to defend the right people now, or I will hand it to the press myself. Vanessa's face turned to stone, but she nodded. Max opened his last. Inside was a deed to a rundown property, a failing vineyard he once tried to save and abandoned. Your last chance to build something on your own. No safety nets, no bailouts, just soil, sweat, and truth. He didn't speak, but for the first time, I saw something like humility in his eyes. Iris stood beside me quietly, watching it all. I turned to her and placed the final envelope in her hands. "Welcome home," I whispered. She smiled, tears rising. "Thank you." We stepped outside past the ivy-covered walls and rose-lined paths. The Ridgway name would survive, but not as it was, not built on appearances, not bought with silence, not passed down like a crown. It would survive because someone chose kindness over convenience, truth over pretense, presence over inheritance. This year, on my 84th birthday, I wasn't forgotten. I was finally understood, and that was the real gift.